Welcome to the X106 podcast. Max and Perry here to talk some NBA free agency that happened over the summer and what we think is going to happen going into the season upcoming. Perry, how are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you today, Max?
Doing well, doing well. So first, let's talk about where the NBA started or ended last season with Golden State obviously winning the championship in 5 games. And the big story about that was the bench for the Warriors obviously taking over for Cleveland. And so Cleveland kind of fell into a place where they needed to retool and restock. And, you know, I think first they signed Derrick Rose. And at first that seemed like, well, he's probably going to be their starting guy with Kyrie wanting to leave. Mm-hmm. And so what do you think about Derrick Rose being on the Cleveland Cavaliers? How is that going to help him either take over that role for now Isaiah Thomas for a little bit or be the backup to Isaiah Thomas?
Well, first, even before they did the Derrick Rose trade, they picked up Jose Calderon, which is a nice little veteran to pick up, but I really didn't see them still being a match to the Warriors. But I think now that they have Derrick Rose, when they picked him up, it was more of it's still not enough, but I kind of like the direction that they're going. Derrick Rose looks like he's playing a little bit better since the injuries from 2011 and 2012. So I think now that they have Derrick Rose in place of Isaiah Thomas until he's coming back, I think he'll hold it down. But I don't know. It's just, can you compete with the Warriors? And right now I still say no, but we'll see.
So do you think right now teams are facing a situation where they're wanting to just compete with Golden State, or do you think there's any kind of chance that, you know, let's put it in Boston, for instance. Is Boston wanting to compete with Golden State, or do they want to compete with Cleveland first?
I think for Eastern Conference teams, it's more of a competing with Cleveland, because once you get past LeBron James, if you can get past him, then I think that's really where the Eastern Conference really trying to put their biggest offseason moves to improve off of, to see if you can match up with LeBron James. But it's interesting because for Western Conference teams, it doesn't seem that way. It seems more of a let's try the small ball thing that the Warriors are trying, and it's been working for the Warriors. So I think for the Western Conference, they're more of a let's get the big man that can shoot, such as like the Pelicans with DeMarcus Cousins and Anthony Davis on the same team. They can both stretch the floor and shoot threes and everything. So I think it's different for both conferences, and I don't know. I think the Celtics, for them, I think they're still trying to see if they can get enough superstar power to match up with LeBron James, and I don't know. It's still interesting. So
right, and we saw Gordon Hayward obviously sign with, that was kind of the free agency July 4th splash of this NBA season. How do you think that will help the Celtics? Because then they obviously traded away Jay Crowder and a few other, you know, and Isaiah Thomas obviously, and then they traded away their future first-round draft pick along with kind of a throwaway second-round draft pick to Cleveland to get Kyrie Irving. Mm-hmm. Is Kyrie Irving and Gordon Hayward truly enough star power to get them over the hump to beat Cleveland in the East?
Well, for Kyrie Irving, I don't want to say that he's peaked, but there's only so much more that he can really improve on. He's already a great ball handler. He's a great shooter. But the thing about Gordon Hayward that interests me is that he's always getting bigger as far as like size and weight. And he's adding muscle, and I think that'll help. Still not a LeBron James guy, but I think that'll help as far as him being able to match up with him and actually pose a threat, as to where like 2 years ago, he's like a little skinny stick. So I just think that he's improving each year. So I think that he'll also improve going into next year too.
Yeah, and I even just looked it up right now that people were believing that it was Isaiah Thomas, Gordon Hayward, Jay Crowder, Al Horford, and, you know, Aaron Baines or Marcus Smart. Two of those guys aren't even on the team anymore. And so they just traded a lot of assets to Cleveland to get Kyrie Irving. Mm-hmm. Now, Kyrie obviously didn't want to be in LeBron James' shadow. I'm wondering, is it possible for Kyrie to truly be the leader on that team? Because we saw what happened without LeBron James in Cleveland. Kyrie really couldn't take that step. Granted, he was young. Is he ready to kind of lead Boston into the next level, do you think? Is he mentally at least, or is his game ready to lead as opposed to just being the second guy?
As far as being ready, I'm not for sure yet. I think he's thrown to the fire right now. As far as like with any other star that's been put in a position to lead, LeBron James had to go through it with his time in Cleveland at first before he left for Miami. Kobe Bryant had to do it as well whenever Shaq left, and Michael Jordan had to do it pretty early in his career whenever he started. So I think now he's kind of like his second chance at being a good leader. And the first time it wasn't really that good, and now he has a couple other good players behind him with Gordon Hayward and Al Horford. So I think he has a better opportunity to do it. I don't know if he's going to be successful. I feel like he'll have more of a chance of being successful after being around LeBron James, since LeBron James makes his players better. So I think that he'll have a better chance of being a better leader this time around with the Celtics.
So with that being said, we have obviously the two probably power teams in the East are the Celtics and the Cavs. Who is the number 2 in the West? We obviously know Golden State's number 1, and not only in the NBA, but in the West. Who is the number 1 or the number 2 in the West to be able to compete with the Warriors?
Well, I would say any other team but the Spurs, but they prove me wrong every year. So I'm going to have to still say the Spurs, especially with Kawhi Leonard getting better. He's starting to being able to shoot a little bit further out. And they just signed Manu Ginobili to another 2-year deal. He's a good veteran. And Pau Gasol as well. And I think just having that veteran core will continue to allow them to be one of the top teams in the West. Now, another interesting team for me is the Rockets, where they just signed Chris Paul. And they gave up a lot for Chris Paul. But I still don't see the Rockets really dethroning the Spurs as the second best team in the West.
Now, one interesting thing I keep reading and hearing about are C.J. McCollum is really trying to recruit Carmelo Anthony to come play in Portland. Now, I do know that Carmelo Anthony loves New York, loves the big city kind of atmosphere. It's New York. Everybody likes playing in New York. You're playing in the Garden. Obviously, the ownership situation is kind of the GM situation, the ownership situation, the president situation is all out of whack. But would you see Carmelo – I know my answer to the question, but do you see Carmelo Anthony being a asset to the Portland Trailblazers to where they could say, all right, we're a legitimate threat, or is Carmelo Anthony not quite the person they're looking for?
I think – I'm not for sure if Carmelo is really ready for that role. I feel like he's getting to the point in his career where – he's starting to realize that he might need to step back to a guy like Damian Lillard, who handles the ball most of the time, and also C.J. McCollum. So I think that if they tried it, it might work. It might not work to the best of potential, as if he was a little bit younger and Damian Lillard wasn't as much of a scoring point guard as he is. But I think if they tried it, I think they could be the 4th best team in the West.
Yeah, the thing I'm not a huge Carmelo Anthony fan. I've always said he was I felt like he was the most overrated basketball player right now, or at least even in the past 4 years, mainly because the ball, he doesn't work in today's NBA.
Yeah.
The reason why the Warriors are so great and why even Cleveland's good is that they move the ball around and they don't rely on one guy it's not an isolation offense.
Exactly.
You can get away with isolation offense as a Cleveland Cavalier when you have LeBron James on your team and he can just, back someone down all the way down to the hole and, make a basket. But Carmelo Anthony, the ball stops with him, and unfortunately that's just not the way you play basketball in today's game. It works with Kobe when you had Kobe out there, D. Wade when he was back in, before he and LeBron came together. Mm-hmm. You had that superstar talent that you could take over a game, but nowadays it doesn't seem like you're able to do that. And what's interesting now is how much, as we talked a little earlier, is how important the bench is. And what's scary about the Warriors now, I don't think any team could compete with them anymore because they upgraded they're probably their 9 to 15. They have 15 guys on the bench maybe. Mm-hmm. From spot number 9 to 15, they upgraded everybody. basically, you have your starting five. JaVale McGee, he's back. Nick Young takes over a spot. You have Omri Kassipi. Is that I can't figure out how to pronounce his name.
I think,
but
right.
He's a 3-point shooter that goes into that offense, and you have plenty of these other guys that they not only just stayed the same, but they got even better,
Exactly.
at least on paper.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what's tough. And I honestly thought Isaiah Thomas, Kyrie Irving would want to go somewhere in the West, maybe even Minnesota.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think Minnesota has a chance to being a very good team. If they can piece it all together with those big four I say, not quite the big four of what we're in terms of star power, but the big four of maybe potential.
Yeah.
Andrew Wiggins, Jimmy Butler, Karl Anthony Towns, just a few. They have that talent to get there, but I don't know if they're ready yet.
Minnesota, they're pretty interesting. I think Cat, he's improving pretty well. Andrew Wiggins, I'm not really for sure about Andrew Wiggins right now. I feel like he's kind of in a point where his career where he's going to have to really improve more off the court, like such as in the weight room and whatnot, because he has the skills. But then you have Jimmy Butler as well, who's a star. He's coming from Chicago. He's used to having the ball. So I think if Jimmy Butler really buys into the Tom Thibodeau offense, which he did in Chicago, I think his assists will go up and whatnot. And then they also have Jeff Teague as a starting point guard. So with Minnesota, they do have a young core. I don't see them really doing anything crazy this year, but I think it's something to really build off of. I feel like they'll definitely they should make the playoffs, and hopefully they do. But I don't see them doing anything or dethroning any of the top teams in the West yet.
Right, and you know what's interesting? I think with Thibodeau, he has the ability to coach defense.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where I think there's kind of a lost art in the NBA. Granted, you're still giving up 100 however many points, but what was, and I hate to keep bringing up the Warriors because, but they're the standard of the NBA.
That's true.
Why did they win? Because they had a great bench and they played defense. Klay Thompson, he's an all-NBA defender.
Mm-hmm.
Draymond Green, Defensive Player of the Year.
Mm-hmm.
Curry and, when Pachulia is off the bench, or when Pachulia is on the court, he and Curry are probably somewhat of defensive liabilities, but Andre Iguodala can come in and play great defense. Kevin Durant can play defense because he's so long and athletic.
Mm-hmm.
They just have that defense. And I think if Minnesota implements the standard of we're going to have great defense, we may not score every single time, but we're going to have great defense, that will help them tremendously in building that young core. And I hope at least they can realize, hey, we have a core here, and we can at least build it, and we may be one superstar away from really being actually contending with Golden State in a few years. It won't happen this year, and it might even have to just wait out the Warriors because that's what Cleveland or the Celtics might be doing, waiting out to see where LeBron goes because you might not win the East until LeBron actually leaves the East / just keeps getting older.
Mm-hmm.
So it'll be interesting to see where that line comes from, who's going to take the next step in the NBA. So I think it's personally Minnesota's going to take the biggest leap. Who do you think is going to take the biggest leap from whether it's a non-playoff team to becoming a playoff team, an 8 seed becoming a viable number 2 contender, or maybe even going the opposite? Who's going to take a step off?
I feel like in the West, you definitely have to say Timberwolves. On paper, they look like they're going to be one of the best teams in a couple of years or so. But I also want to think about the Milwaukee Bucks because you have Giannis Antetokounmpo leading the way. And I think as he gets better, he's going to attract hopefully some good role players or another star player that's going to be able to help him. And I think as he continues to get better, the Bucks will get better and hopefully be a top 3 team in the East and hopefully meet up with the Timberwolves pretty soon. So
yeah, that'd be a fun series matchup with those two teams and how young and athletic and fun they are. Giannis Antetokounmpo, he is so athletic and tall. It's amazing to watch. he really is a freak. He's a freak of nature because you watch him and he's just so, I want to say elegant. I don't know if elegant's the right word, but it's almost beautiful to watch him play basketball because you don't see a lot of 7-footers like that glide up and down the court.
That's true.
And be able to shoot like that and be able to just move around like that. I can't even move like that when I'm 6'4", you know? It's pretty incredible. So do you have any predictions as far as the NBA season goes? Maybe we can wait on that for a little bit longer, but do you have any initial, at least post-trade with Kyrie Irving going to the Celtics, does that influence you where you think you would ever go with your picks to an NBA Finals at least?
I am hopeful that the Celtics will dethrone the Cavaliers as the top team in the East. Now, will they? I'm not really sure about that yet because Cleveland still has some pretty good rebounders that the Celtics don't have. So, for right now, if I had to pick, I would still pick the Warriors, Cavs for one more year. And then after that, we'll see which teams got better during the 2017-18 season, and then we'll be able to tell like what's going to happen in a couple seasons or so.
Right. So we have both of I think it's Cavs Warriors too. I don't think the Celtics are quite there yet. I think it'll be an Eastern Conference matchup where LeBron James will take over as usual. Obviously, a lot can happen between now and even December because I think December 15th is – I think sometime in December is when new free agent signees can be traded to different teams. And the NBA is so crazy you can reasonably pick up and move to another team and join in and play. Not like the NFL where you have to learn a whole new playbook and everything. So I think it'll be interesting to see. I think on our next show we'll talk more about where LeBron James will be next year because that's certainly a big topic. And that's all the time we have for today. Be sure to tune in to Weekend Sports Kickoff every Friday, 2 to 5. Yes, 2 to 5. We are on 3 hours now. So be sure to tune in on Weekend Sports Kickoff. And on every Bearcat home game, we will have the football games here on X106. And thank you for tuning in to the X106 podcast.